doing the same thing over and over again, and my brain can't really take it anymore. I feel like I'm doing the same routines on the court, the same execution, the same play. I mean, the same strategies and everything. And I feel like my mind is just. I don't feel inspired. I play out in the court, and I don't feel like I'm chasing something.
I mean, you can just see the immense exhaustion on his face there, and it doesn't excuse what he did, but you can kind of understand the point to which he had got with that.
And it's been very interesting, this run of tournaments in terms of the focus on umpires. You know, they always say they don't want to be the centre of attention, but it does seem more and more the business of sport and the pressure on these tennis players is playing out, and they're getting a lot more of the scrutiny. That discussion may be for another time. I can't let you go without mentioning Rafa Nadal, though, because for everything that happened with Tsitsipas, Nadal won his match, and things suddenly look a whole lot better than maybe just winning a first-round encounter.
Yeah, and by comparison, the only thing that Nadal faced in that match was a code violation for timing, upon which he just kind of, waved away, didn't say anything to the umpire. So it was
wouldn't want to ruin his routine.
Exactly. And if things were looking good for Nadal already, I mean, it's looking really good for him now on this side of the draw. Remember, he's on the opposite side from Roger Federer and Novak Djokovic. And now 4 of the top 10 seeds are out on this side of his draw. So in many ways, the pathway is clear now for him to go all the way to the final to face Roger or Novak. And so we're back to the whole idea of, chasing the all-time record, aren't we? It's 2 away from Roger Federer on 18. The only player potentially, though, who could still stand in his way in his side of the draw is a certain Nick Kyrgios. And we know that between these two, there is a little bit of bad blood. So we will wait and see for that. But Asco's game yesterday sailed through straight sets against John Millman, looking very strong indeed. And remember, he won the warm-up match in Montreal, Canada, ahead of this US Open. I think of the 3, many are backing Nadal to go all the way this year.
Okay, Chrissy, thanks very much indeed. Stay with us. Up next, from missing the cut to going under the knife while his rivals were taking part at the Tour Championship, Tiger went back on the operating table.
To go. What if you go Korean? There are many ways to go, but only one way to go Korean.
Welcome back. You wouldn't be surprised if Tiger Woods had his surgeons on speed dial these days. The former world #1 has been back in the operating theatre, this time for a 5th surgery on his left knee. Tiger revealed in a statement he's aiming for an October return to action for an event in Japan, having undergone the procedure to repair cartilage damage last week. He was able to have the operation, of course, after missing out on qualifying for the PGA Tour season-ending Tour Championship after a really mixed couple of months in terms of his form and niggling injuries since winning the Masters in April. Now we're into the final countdown to the 2019 Rugby World Cup, and 2-time defending champions New Zealand have named their 31-man squad for the tournaments in Japan, with coach Steve Hansen seemingly opting for youth over experience. He's named 19 players who will be making their tournament debuts, with only 3 players, Sonny Bill Williams, Kieran Reid and second row Sam Whitelock, in the squad, who are veterans of both the 2011 and 2015 World Cup winning sides. The approach means there's surprisingly no place for prop Owen Franks, a player with over 100 caps for his country, and Hansen admitted it was a tough decision to make.
But he is one of the great All Blacks. He's certainly shown true character. His professionalism both on and off the field has been magnificent over the years. He's played over 100 test matches. But unfortunately, we as the three selectors, we believe the game requires us to have big, mobile number ones and number threes. And in this case, we just think the other guys that we've named are more so than he, and therefore we have to make a tough decision. I would also like you to just take a moment and reflect the hard effort and the disappointment of the people that have missed out. It's always a really tough time in their career, and really, really tough when, in a lot of cases, the guys that have missed out, it's not because they're not good enough, it's just because they've got so much talent.
Yeah, a lucky problem for New Zealand to have, but really tough for the tournament every 4 years for those players to miss out. In football news though, Red Star Belgrade, Dinamo Zagreb and Olympiacos booked their place in the Champions League group stage for this season on Tuesday night, leaving just 3 places left in the draw, which will take place in Monaco on Thursday. And there is a whole lot of interest to see what happens to Ajax. Remember them? They were one of the most exciting young teams in Europe last season. They won the Eredivisie in the Netherlands, knocked out Juve and Real Madrid in the Champions League, and came within a whisker, so close of making that final. But despite being semi-finalists last year, they've had to go through the qualifying rounds again this season, and they go into the second leg of their tie against Apoel Nicosia with nothing to split them. Both sides are goalless, and this a very different looking side to the one we saw run riot last year. They've sold both Matthias de Ligt and Frankie de Jong. Boss Erik ten Hag has described it as a must-win game for his side. Well, if Ajax have seen some stars leaving them in recent times, so too as the men's draw at this year's US Open, as you've been hearing. So as we end our show, here's a look at some of those early exits in your latest Rolex Minute. Thanks for watching and see you next time.
Day 2 of the US Open saw several leading men fall at Flushing Meadows. Fourth-seeded Dominic Thiem was the biggest casualty, losing in 4 sets to Italy's Thomas Fabiano. Fellow top tenors Stefanos Tsitsipas and Karen Khachanov also failed to progress beyond the opening round. There was a further upset in the women's singles as 11th seed and 2017 champion Sloane Stephens lost in straight sets to Russian qualifier Anna Kalinskaya. But top seed and defending champion Naomi Osaka is safely through to round 2 following her victory over Anna Plinkova. Osaka could meet teenage sensation Coco Gauff in the 3rd round. The youngest player in the draw at 15, Gauff fought back from a set and a breakdown to defeat another teenager, Anastasia Potapova, and will next face Hungary's Timea Babos.
Excuse me, miss, who dropped this?
It's just a penny.
Just a penny? Just a penny? It all begins with the humble penny. Whether writing your first check or cashing big checks, to those at the top making their mark, closing deals round the clock. On Quest Means Business, we know every penny has power. And it's not how many you have, it's what you do with them that counts. That's the marvel of money. Quest Means Business. What a profitable hour!
I'm Yamal Bagher in Sinjar, Iran, and this is CNN.
city is the closing chapter of ISIS's presence. They have left absolute devastation in their wake. Extraordinary to stand exactly where ISIS may in fact have been plotting attacks against the West. We get rare permission to enter. We're heading out deep inside gang territory. Venezuela's dark lurch into poverty and chaos. This crisis all created by the mad policies of a government that now wants to hide their collapse. Eerily quiet, isn't it? This city almost constantly living with the threat of a Russian invasion. One of the most remote places on the planet. CNN gained rare access to the island to see the shocking toll of our daily habits. They just seem to be following us wherever we go. Mission planning, air power.
I'm Deanna Gallagher aboard the papal plane, and this is CNN.
This is CNN Breaking News.
Hello and welcome to a special edition of Connect the World. I'm Linda Kincaid in Atlanta. We are following two breaking news stories for you this hour. The Caribbean on hurricane watch as Tropical Storm Dorian intensifies and changes course, now headed for Puerto Rico and Florida. Also, the United Kingdom's Prime Minister making a controversial move which could put the country on the verge of a constitutional crisis. Max Foster is outside the UK Houses of Parliament for us. And Max, this is uncharted territory.
Absolutely, Linda. We begin with that breaking news. Out of London, Queen Elizabeth approving the British Prime Minister's request to suspend Parliament early next month. Lawmakers will now return in mid-October, giving them just days to pass any legislation to prevent a no-deal Brexit. Earlier, opposition leader Jeremy Corbyn said he wrote to the Queen to protest Mr Johnson's request.
Yes, I've protested in the strongest possible terms on behalf of my party, and I believe all the other opposition parties are going to join in with this, in simply saying that suspending Parliament is not acceptable, it's not on. What the Prime Minister's doing is a sort of smash and grab on our democracy in order to force through a no-deal exit from the European Union.
Turns out she'd already approved the request, though, so the letter probably is academic. Reaction from other UK politicians has been swift, though. Anger and bewilderment, with one fellow Conservative describing the move as, quote, unconstitutional, or rather a constitutional outrage, and profoundly undemocratic. We have some of CNN's best view in the UK capital. CNN's Nick Robertson, our international diplomatic editor, here in Westminster. Also Anna Stewart, she's live outside 10 Downing Street. First of all, to you, Anna. We're expecting a normal parliamentary session. Now we've got a broken parliamentary session in this Queen's speech. Take us through what it'll look like.
So MPs will return as expected next week, but as you've said, they will then, just within days of having returned from summer, be suspended, and that is to allow for a new session to begin with a Queen's speech. Now what this does, Max, is reduce the amount of time that MPs will be able to try and introduce new legislation or try and disrupt the agenda of Parliament in order to try and prevent a no-deal Brexit. That is what opposition parties met yesterday to discuss all the different options around that. So the Prime Minister here has called for a Queen's speech. Now he says the reason he is doing this is nothing to do with Brexit. It's simply that he is a new Prime Minister with plenty of domestic policies that he wants to implement, and it is, I have to say, very usual for a new Prime Minister to do this. What is unusual is the context of an absolute political crisis where he has so much opposition and really hardly a majority at all, a majority of one, I believe, at the moment. So this is the context, and particularly listen to what Boris said, because he did say that he still has given MPs some time to be able to debate Brexit.
There will be ample time on both sides of that crucial October the 17th summit, ample time in Parliament for MPs to debate the EU, to debate Brexit, and all the other issues. Ample time.
So he isn't proroguing Parliament beyond that Brexit date, which some people had feared. He is allowing some debate time, but it is incredibly limited. Now, very interesting, Max, is what John Bercow, the Speaker of the House of Commons, said today. Let me bring it up for you. He said, however it is dressed up, it is blindingly obvious that the purpose of this prorogation now would be to stop Parliament debating Brexit and performing its duty in shaping a course for the country. Why is his reaction so important? Well, he is the man
that politically has a lot of power in Parliament to try and help people that want to prevent a no-deal Brexit from using various legislative ways of doing so. He can help them break the convention, and it would appear, although he is apolitical, to certainly be keen on helping them with that. We will find out, of course, next week. Tuesday is when the election returns.
Thanks, Dana. Then in Downing Street, we've got various protesters here chanting. We've been hearing them say Johnson is a liar, stop the coup, Nick. This, if it wasn't a divisive issue already, become more so. But can Boris Johnson be blocked, do you think, in the time that we've got?
He's taken the initiative. Some might say stolen it at the expense of democracy would be the argument, stolen the initiative against his opponent. So yes, he has reduced the amount of time that they will have to try to block him. And it does seem that he has now, they were already in a difficult position because they were divided in terms of trying to find a legislative mechanism and try in a way of calling a vote of no confidence, and then what do you replace his government with? Something behind Jeremy Corbyn, the opposition. There was an agreement on that, so the legal mechanism became the default way. So really Boris Johnson is heading them off at the pass and giving them less time to do it. So it does seem at this stage he has the initiative, he's drawn the battle lines, he's choosing where and when to fight these political engagements, and he has the upper hand at the moment.
And crucially, it allows him to go back to Brussels and say he's in control of Parliament, therefore give me a deal, which is what his people are briefing effectively today. That's what he wants. He's not trying to undermine Parliament.
He is trying to give himself a stronger negotiating position in Brussels. And Brussels' view under the previous Prime Minister, Theresa May, was always that she will never be able to go the hardline route and have a no-deal Brexit because Parliament won't let her. And they sort of felt perhaps under Boris Johnson, even though he threatens it more convincingly, he would be stopped. The message today now is clear. I'm very unlikely to be stopped. So you have to take my threat of a no-deal Brexit seriously. And this is the way that he believes it's necessary to negotiate with Brussels, and it's generally the accepted view in Britain that Britain's been bad at negotiating with Brussels, that Brussels is bigger and stronger and tougher and better negotiators. But no, he's trying to go up to them head to head, and now they have to be convinced by what he is saying, that it's his words, not Parliament, that counts. Take him at his word. The question is, will they capitulate to his terms? And the answer we get so far is no. So where does that leave him? Utterly undermined with a no deal? Will he precipitate a no deal? And is he really going to be? Is he going to be able to walk away from that and be happy with that? He says yes, but we don't know.
Okay. Well, Boris Johnson's father, Stanley Johnson, should be on the phone with us. Can you hear me, Stanley? It's quite a lot of noise.
No, I can hear you. Absolutely. Can you hear me?
Yes. Good. You don't. Yes, I can. You don't always agree with your son, but do you agree with him on this issue and how he's handling it?
No, I certainly do. I've read his letter, which he sent to the Queen, and I know the Queen has agreed to proroguing Parliament. And honestly, I think that this is absolutely the right thing. Even though, as you rightly point out, I was a Remainer, campaign activist for Remain right up until the referendum of June 2016, but since then I've been saying to myself and saying to others, we've got to get this one through. The people have voted for it. We have to deliver it. And honestly, I think there has been a sea change in the politics of this country as people see that Boris really is going to deliver it. And this particular letter today and the action which will follow as a result of it does seem to me to be absolutely consistent with his vision. That yes, he has to get Brexit done, and then there's a whole set of things which this country needs to do, and that is what the Queen's speech will set out. So he's saying to himself, enough time has been spent on Brexit, let's clear the deck, let's have a proper Queen's speech, and let's move forward after that in a post-Brexit situation. So yes, I'm in favour. I think he's done the right thing, and I think he will go through with it.
Give us a sense of this way of thinking here, because it's been suggested to me today that he's on a war footing. He's been quite Churchillian about all of this. He kept it very quiet, didn't he, this meeting with the Queen, dispatching Privy Councillors up to Balmoral, in a secret operation effectively, and then only announcing it a bit later on. Just describe how he's describing this and whether or not he is consulting more widely.
In August, the Queen is in in Balmoral. So if you want to have a meeting of a Privy Council, you have to send your Privy Councillors up to Balmoral. There are only three or four of them there, I think. And yes, I mean all the right steps have been taken. And you know, for a Prime Minister for rogue Parliament is not an unusual thing at all. In fact, this particular Parliament, as Boris pointed out in his letter, has been sitting, close to 340 days. And that's the nearest anybody ever got in 400 years was 250 days. So it's high time that we did have a suspension of Parliament. Yes, I think you're right if you say this is related and will help, certainly, a resolution of the Brexit issue. And I think, honestly, if you wanted to challenge Boris for being high-handed, you would have said, well, one option available to him would have been to say, okay, let's suspend Parliament right up over the October 31st period. So we went out without Parliament having a chance to stop it. So this way, I think, he has surprised everybody by going for it now. Yes, there will be a shutdown, and we will be able to concentrate on the business in hand.
Nevertheless, the House Commons Speaker John Bercow, in a position where he don't traditionally comment on political announcements, he certainly is. Obviously, he's a bit of a different speaker as well, but this is what he said. However it's dressed up, it's blindingly obvious that the purpose of suspending Parliament now would be to stop MPs debating Brexit and performing its duty in shaping a course for the country. Yes, there is time to debate it, but not enough, crucially. That's what he's arguing.
Well, I do understand where Bercow is coming from. He long ago, I think, discarded the normally impartial role of Speaker, and made it quite clear the other day when he was speaking in Edinburgh that he would, as he said, fight with every bone in his body to stop Brexit. And you do ask yourself, this is quite an unusual position for a Speaker to take. But honestly, I think that we are going to have a recognition now that Parliament has spoken on so many occasions about Brexit. It has thrown out on 3 occasions Mrs May's withdrawal bill. It's absolutely clear now that there has to be a resolution of this issue, and I think that Boris has done the right thing today, and I very much anticipate that matters will now move rapidly to a conclusion. Whether or not the EU realizes that it would be in its own interest to make substantial changes to the withdrawal agreement, I don't know. But I do know that one way or another, as Boris has put it, we will be out of the EU by October the 31st this year.
Okay, Stanley Johnson, father of Boris Johnson, thank you very much indeed for sparing the time to speak to us today. What did you make that, Nick? It's the argument that all of this side are basically making, that this is, just normal procedure. Doesn't feel like it, though.
It doesn't, and I think what we understand here is that Stanley, who at one time, as he said, was opposed to his son's actions, and of course his son was taking, as many of his other children were opposed to Boris as well. They have political journalistic positions as well. I think what it makes clear today is that the lines and the differences are very clearly drawn, and Boris Johnson has really taken the initiative. The differences are going to grow, that the anger is going to grow, that the frustrations will grow. These were all things that were predicted would happen if Boris Johnson became Prime Minister and went on this course. And what we're seeing now are those predictions come true. One of those predictions, and this is not in reference to what Stanley Johnson, his father, is saying, but what we've heard from the